After a truly humiliating defeat in the 2024 election, the Democrat Party is scrambling to find a new face for the party, a new leader of the party, and a name that is being floated around is former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg. But not only is his name being floated around, he's been taking really big steps to show that he is gearing up for a presidential run in 2028. He recently held a rally in Des Moines, Iowa. He declined to run for the open Senate seat and the open governor's mansion in Michigan, and really his increased presence on social media, increased presence on different podcasts really shows that he is leaning into how Donald Trump won in 2024, leaning into these new media, alternative media platforms that really helped propel Donald Trump to a victory in 2024. But now the real question is Pete Buttigieg the leader the party really needs? So today, we're going to be breaking down his strengths, his weaknesses, and why he might be the new leader of the Democrat Party. Stick around to the end. Now, we'll start off with strengths. I'll be nice and we can start off here. Buttigieg is a great communicator. Like, don't get me wrong. As someone who is a center-right, politically speaking, center-right, who definitely does not agree with a lot of things that Buttigieg has to say, he is a great communicator and is extremely comfortable in his communication style. Then you want to talk about just his comfortability or his ability to go on podcasts, shows where he knows he's not popular. He may know the audience is not with him. He's willing to go and speak. You know, he was one of the few Biden officials that would go on Fox News. Everyone else would go to CNN, MSNBC. That's where they would go. He is willing to go into the territory of the people they really need. Because the reality is the Democrat Party, they don't have an issue with support among the elite, the wealthy. They have an issue with working class voters. They have an issue with moderates and independents. And going on these shows where he knows he's a foe, he knows he is the foe here. He is not a friend. He is not an ally going on here. And that is a skill that Democrats really lack across the board. And it could produce huge results in future elections if this is something they truly decided to lean into. Just think about Trump. How many interviews has Trump gone and done with people who really didn't like him? Tons. Probably hundreds of them. You think about just the 2024 race. How many interviews with non-friendly interviewers did Kamala Harris do? She did one. How many did Trump do? 100, 200, 300? I genuinely, I don't know. Maybe like 100 to 150? You know, Kamala Harris, she did, one interview with Brett Baier? It was supposed to be an hour long. And then she showed up 30 minutes late and then cut it 10 minutes short. And it was really, truly disastrous. She wouldn't go on anything that was not friendly media. She lived in this bubble. And for a party that has a very hard time stepping outside of their bubble, Buttigieg brings a clear answer to that problem. And when Buttigieg ran in 2020, he was a relatively unknown mayor from a medium-sized town in Indiana. And he somehow ascended so quickly that he won the Iowa caucuses, came in second in the New Hampshire caucuses, and was able, through this performance that he had, to get a spot in the Biden administration. And in 2028, he'll be 46 years old, almost half the age of Joe Biden, and a very fresh face compared to most leadership within inside of the Democratic Party. Plus, he served in the military and checks a lot of different boxes. Well, simply because he's gay, he checks that box because we know how important checking the minority boxes for the Democrat Party. You know, if he was straight, he'd be screwed. He couldn't do anything. But since he's gay, well, they'll let him in the fold. But that's really what he has going for him. And I think there's a fair assessment, a fair case to make that his liabilities clearly outweigh the assets that come along with him. Does he have I'd say two important assets in a general election? One, he's a great communicator and he's extremely comfortable with shows that are not, in media personalities who are maybe not the most friendly toward him. Very comfortable in that skin. And number two, he's 46 years old. He will be 46 years old in 2028. That's what he has going for him. But the liabilities may outweigh that quite a bit, especially when it comes to his leadership at the Department of Transportation during the Biden administration. And because of his showing in 2020, the party decided that they were going to appoint him to lead the Department of Transportation, in which he oversaw many operational and visual failures while leading the department. When the Norfolk Southern train derailed in Ohio, which spilled toxic chemicals into the groundwater there, Buttigieg waited over a week to even speak about it publicly. It took over 3 weeks for him to visit the site. Donald Trump even beat him there, handing out water bottles, handing out paper towels, handing out anything that they needed. Well, Buttigieg basically was on a public avoidance mission. And now he did admit afterwards on CNN that he misjudged the optics. But that's kind of a cold comfort for the residents who are now drinking and breathing toxic fumes. Who, if you're going to live in the area still, you're probably going to have long-term implications due to all the toxins that are now in the ground. And a Department of Transportation whistleblower claimed that resources were politicized, that they favored blue states, blue districts, blue counties over red states. Now, we don't have a ton of data. I think you can make the case with FEMA. We saw that happen during the hurricanes in 2024. There was a FEMA director who is specifically telling people that you are not to go to houses with Trump signs in the front. Do not go there. Do not give out disaster relief to them. It is a total mismanagement, total incompetence that this was allowed to happen. And then, of course, we know that Mayor Pete decided to, and if you didn't know, Mayor Pete's gay, box checked. Number 2, Mayor Pete decided to adopt some children while he was the lead in the department. So he decided in mid-August 2021 to go on maternity leave, which no one even knew that he was gone. Well, at the same time, ports clogged up, shelves were emptied. At the same time, Buttigieg took paternity leave for 2 months, going offline, completely offline. Even Democrats called it out as tone deaf. Leading a crisis from the nursery isn't leadership. You accepted this position understanding what the realities were. Imagine if Sean Duffy or J.D. Vance right now went on paternity leave for 2 months. Imagine that. Imagine how the Democrats would absolutely rip him to shreds. Imagine. But then you want to talk about his private jet hypocrisy. Buttigieg took over 18 taxpayer-funded private jet trips while preaching, or to preach, about climate action and biking to work. He sits here, tries to be, environmentally conscious, environmental friendly, everybody needs to have electric vehicles, get rid of natural gas. Well, he probably emitted in those 18 trips more carbon than I probably ever will in my life, than probably everyone in my family ever will in their lives, all combined. And it totally screams elitism. Rules for me, not for thee. I get different rules, you have to live by my rules. And that is something that voters absolutely hate. But these aren't just oopsies. They show that Buttigieg was more focused on his image than actually fixing problems. Plus, you want to add in his insane DEI makeover of the department. Buttigieg pumped over $1 billion into, quote, reconnecting communities to fix so-called racist highways that split minority neighborhoods. Take a listen to this. Take a listen to this.
Or if an underpass was constructed such that a bus carrying mostly black and Puerto Rican kids to a beach, or there would have been, in New York was designed too low for it to pass by, that obviously reflects racism that went into those design choices. I don't think we have anything to lose by confronting that simple reality. And I think we have everything to gain by acknowledging it and then dealing with it, which is why the reconnecting communities, that $1 billion, is something we want to get to work.
So this guy's trying to tell us about how, we have crumbling infrastructure all over the country, but we need to take a bridge that was constructed for racist reason. There was racist intent behind it. It was constructed 4 or 5 feet too low. Therefore, we need to remediate the entire situation. It's just kind of a joke. And this is the things that Americans hate. They hate these types of things. Buttigieg also reinstated an Obama-era hiring rule that favored minorities for the Department of Transportation projects, which pushed $1.6 billion into training programs for black and Hispanic workers. Meanwhile, completely ignoring white communities. And here's my thing. If there's a problem, why does it have to be race-based? If there is infrastructure that's crumbling, why are we going to focus on black communities first or white communities? Why don't we just focus on all of the communities together? Why don't we do everything we can to make sure that we can equally help them as much as possible? Not ignoring the white neighborhoods for the black neighborhoods, or ignoring the black neighborhoods for the white neighborhoods. Why should it go either way? Why should we be hiring just black and Hispanic workers? Why don't we hire people that are best suited for the job? They're going to help with operational efficiencies. That are going to do the best job possible, that are hired based on their merit, not based on the color of their skin. That is discrimination. Totally discrimination. And on top of that, we saw how, under this DEI makeover of the administration, the FAA, under Buttigieg, swapped out the term cockpit for flight deck and airman for aircrew to be more gender neutral and more conforming to all the offended little, I'm not going to say it on here, but you know what I want to say, all these offended little pricks. They also recruited huge amounts of diversity pilots and controllers. They're specifically going after people who were not white, not straight. Why the hell? I don't care if my air traffic controller is black, white, female, Asian, transgender. I do not care. Are they at the top of their game? Are they the best in their field? Are they the best at what they do? I want to be safe. I don't care if it's a black woman or a white man or a transgender black woman who's atheist. I do not care. Can you do the job? Are you the best in your field? Are you top 10% in your field? You are totally putting safety at jeopardy. And when it comes to transportation, safety should 100% trump ideology every day of the week. Every day of the week. And Buttigieg's obsession with DEI just shows how much he tried to pander to the progressive base. Not for Americans, not for the leadership, not for what Americans need. How is calling highways racist helping anything? Voters just want roads to get fixed, not to be lectured on systematic guilt. Not to be lectured at about systematic racism that, for the most part, really doesn't exist. Systematic racism, it really just doesn't exist anymore. It did exist 80 years ago. I guess not 80, what would that be? 60 years ago, back in the 50s, back in the 60s. Yes, it 100% existed. But it just doesn't anymore. And there may be a law, a rule in a certain place that is racist. Well, let's fight it together. You pointed out to me, let's fight it together. But just saying, oh, there's systematic racism, but not having an actual law, an actual rule to point at, you do nothing but hurt your own cause. You're doing nothing but hurting your own cause. And then you want to talk about the disconnect with key voters. Buttigieg completely bombed with African Americans in 2020. He had multiple polls out of South Carolina that showed he had zero, goose egg, 0% support in a South Carolina primary from African Americans. In his South Bend nature, marked by a police shooting, racial tensions, still haunts him, and his DEI push looks much more like damage control, not a genuine outreach to help underserved, underprivileged communities. And Hispanic and working class voters who swung to Trump in 2024 see him as an Ivy League elitist. That's the big issue with the Democrat Party, and that Buttigieg does not solve. This elitist mentality that they have. Buttigieg does nothing to solve that issue. His resume doesn't scream man of the people. His Harvard, Oxford, McKinsey resume, this little box that he was formed in, it just does not scream like how are you winning back working class voters? How are you winning back Hispanics? Two huge groups that your party messed with. How are you winning back young men? Now, granted, yes, did he go on some podcast? Absolutely. We're going to have to see what happens as it gets more and more into the actual swing of things in 2028, because there will be a very crowded field. It's very probable that you'll have Kamala Harris, Gretchen Whitmer, maybe Josh Shapiro, Gavin Newsom, all gunning for the nomination in 2028. And I think it's fair to say, like, we can criticize Buttigieg all we want, but we always have to keep it very relative. Like, it is relative to the other people in the party. It's relative to the other people who are actually going to run in 2028. And I just think that there are better candidates. I think even Whitmer would be a better candidate than Buttigieg. And ultimately, like, relatively speaking, Buttigieg is like a top tier candidate for the Democrat Party. Like, don't get me wrong here. He's got a lot of liabilities in a general election. But if you're looking at a primary, he is definitely a top caliber candidate. Overall, if you're just looking at Buttigieg in a vacuum, he's got a lot of issues. But if you're looking at him relative, because life is a game of relativity, it simply is. It's all relative to all the other leaders of the Democrat Party. And I think he's still a top tier candidate when it comes to this. And really the biggest thing that is really starting to come out now is the baggage that comes from working with inside the Biden administration. Just take a listen to this. Listen to Chuck Todd for a second.
Not just undermine Biden. In many ways, I think this Biden book is only going to not just undermine Biden, but I think make it toxic for anybody that worked for Biden. Because then it becomes, where were you? How did you participate in the cover-up? Pete Buttigieg, this may mean something for you. You know, you were a cabinet secretary. Are you going to now tell us, yeah, I didn't have much interaction with him? Well, then why didn't you say something? I had a cabinet secretary tell me that. They had no interaction with him and wondered about that. I had that off the record. After Biden quit, I've since shared it with people. I'm still not going to share who the cabinet secretary was because that's not I'm trying, I believe in keeping your word as a journalist, and it was an off the record as far as it being told to me. And I think it's up to that person to decide whether to speak out or not. But I think it's a question, anybody who worked directly for Biden. So Gina Raimondo, if she thinks about running for president, Pete Buttigieg, all of these cabinet secretaries are now going to have to answer for all of this. And I do wonder if it's going to make anybody that touches Biden persona non grata, not just anybody directly in the Biden.
Chuck Todd's got a pretty solid point right here. Buttigieg was a Biden loyalist. Buttigieg is tied forever to an unpopular administration, inflation, border issues, the 2024 loss, and simply the fact that when did you know that Biden, okay, now we know Biden has metastatic prostate cancer, stage 9 on the Gleason score, which does not develop overnight. That can take up to a decade. How long? When did you know? When did anybody know? I think that's going to be the litmus test for the Democrat Party going forward. When did you know? When did you know Joe Biden was in mental decline? Because once prostate cancer spreads to your bones, it can spread to your brain. That could explain a lot of what's going on right now. It really could. But all in all, when it comes to Buttigieg, he's a lightweight in a party that is craving heavyweights. But ultimately, everyone else in the Democrat Party is a lightweight too. So it's kind of relative. Relatively speaking, he's kind of one of the more heavyweights. He's young. He's a good talker. He's willing to go on media. He's willing to engage with personalities, media personalities that are not friendly towards him. And ultimately, yes, do I think that a lot of what he has to say is just recycled progressive talking points? And I think there's a lot of Republicans who look at him for the scandals, the DEI, the elitism. They really make him a Republican dream opponent. But ultimately, I do think he is someone who could win back some ground from Donald Trump, from where the election victories were here. I do see that. I don't know if J.D. Vance, if J.D. Vance or DeSantis was the nominee in 2028, would they be able to hold these same margins in the swing states here? You know, I bet you he could definitely close this gap in Wisconsin. This could be a race that even Buttigieg won in 2028. And it's going to depend a lot on what happens with the Trump administration over the next number of years. But ultimately, I think that he could be a formidable candidate against a Republican opponent. I really do. And I know there's going to be a lot of people in the Republican Party who disagree with me. But I do. If we're looking at a Democrat, you know, you want to talk about 2028. Want to talk about the presidential election? Okay, what do we have here? Okay, Buttigieg, Rahm Emanuel. Yeah, I hate this lady. I genuinely do. The former Secretary of Commerce under Biden, not a big fan of her. Some sports personalities, a bumbling buffoon. Honestly, he's probably a top tier candidate in this race on the Democrat side. You know, who else is he vying with? I think you're vying with someone like a Josh Shapiro. I don't think Whitmer is going to do as good as she maybe once could have. I think she's taken a lot of heat recently, but I think a Shapiro. But also Shapiro's Jewish, and I have a hard time seeing the Democrat Party nominating a Jewish man to lead the party. I was like, I think Andy Bashir. Maybe Roy Cooper, but I think that's kind of far off. I think it's kind of far off to think about that. I think, honestly, Dean Phillips. I'm not the biggest fan of Dean Phillips from a, more of a right-leaning perspective, but ultimately for a Democrat, this would be like a dream come true. I think he could win. I really do. He was the one Democrat in 2024 who was trying to tell everyone that Biden was in serious mental decline. But then, of course, Buttigieg. It's like, I think it's Buttigieg, Bashir, maybe Cooper, maybe Gavin Newsom. It's kind of weird. He's trying to really move to the middle and be a moderate, but you're not supposed to do that till the general election. So there's a lot of liberals who are very unhappy with the direction that he started to move. Maybe a John Ossoff, maybe a Dean Phillips. I think AOC actually in a Democrat primary would do insanely well. I think the DNC mob bosses would try and do anything they could to make sure she didn't get the nomination. But ultimately, I think she would do very, very good, and so would Josh Shapiro. But he's Jewish, and that's a whole complex that you have to deal with right there. So ultimately, I think Buttigieg would put up a formidable challenge against a Republican opponent in 2028. And so that is going to wrap things up for today, folks. As always, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And you may ask why. Why should you subscribe to the channel? I like to consider myself a common sense conservative. I am definitely a center-right, politically speaking. That is where my political views line up with. I'm not here to be full Trump all the time, 100% with Trump or 100% against Trump. I am here to call balls and strikes. When we see a policy that makes sense, we're gonna, no matter who's supporting it, we're gonna support it. If we see something that the Democrats are doing that we like, we're gonna talk about it. If we see something Republicans that we don't like, we're gonna talk about it. We're going to call it for what it is. That's someone you're looking for. You need to find someone who's not going to just blow smoke up your butt. Someone who's not controlled by a big billionaire running a media company. I'm an independent journalist. I'm completely self-funded. I own another business completely self-funded in everything I do here. We have no one else telling us what we're going to report on. We're going to report on what we want to report on, what we think it really should be at the front of people's minds. But so if you resonate with that, that's why I'd ask you, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and really the best way to support us is to watch our videos. YouTube, that's what they care about. They care if you watch, how long do you watch a video? It's called the average view duration. The longer the average person watches my videos, the more it's going to get pushed out to people. It's just as simple as that. So if that's something you're looking for, hit that subscribe button, watch our videos. We greatly appreciate it, and we will catch you next time, folks.